Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. We have two great guests, former Speaker Newt Gingrich and Eric Hovde, the Wisconsin Republican candidate for the Senate. But before we get to them, I'm officially appointing myself a fact checker. A fact checker. $1 billion is being spent by Kamala Harris and her team to lie to you, the American people, and lie they do. The media are lying to you. The so-called moderators during the debates, they're lying to you. Why? I'm going to take two issues that seem to be at the top of the list: immigration and abortion. And in 10 or 12 minutes, I'm going to explain to you why these are false issues, phony issues, that they are lying about. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why conservatives, Republicans, whether they're on TV or radio, or running for office, don't read the information so they know how to respond. So let's start this way. When I think of great women leaders, I think of Margaret Thatcher, Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir, Abigail Adams, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Condoleezza Rice, Barbara Jordan, Senator Margaret Chase Smith, Sandra Day O'Connor, Ian Rand, Susan B. Anthony. Kamala Harris doesn't come to mind. Why? Well, she's a woman, if the Democrats will allow us to define her as a woman, but she's utterly unaccomplished. Utterly unaccomplished. She's been in public life a long time, and she really hasn't done a damn thing of note. Nothing. Now, one issue at a time. Immigration. For 3 years, we were told that the border is secure, despite the fact that the border was wide open. Then Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and the other reprobates decided, no. We have this bill. It's the Republicans' fault. It's Donald Trump's fault. We had this wonderful bill that would have secured the border. Now, they destroyed all the immigration laws. They destroyed all of Donald Trump's policies that were working. They said the border was secure, even though they destroyed all those protections. And now it's this one bill. Now, I want you to listen carefully to me. I have to be honest, I'm getting very frustrated about this because whether it's radio or TV, my colleagues, whether it's news people, they don't know what's going on either. They just take Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party talking points and they react to them or they regurgitate them. In reality, this so-called Senate bipartisan bill was not a bipartisan bill. Please listen. Please listen, because Kamala Harris says the Republicans and Trump blocked it. Trump made the call and said, block it. And when I come into the presidency, it's going to be the first bill I introduce. Well, if that's true, God forbid, if she's president, it's going to be the first bill that dies. Why? Because what the media don't tell you, none of these moderators have told you, and unfortunately the Republicans don't tell you, what killed it included 6 Democrat senators in the final vote who voted against it. Ed Markey of Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts, Bob Menendez, New Jersey, now of some federal penitentiary, Alex Padilla, senator from California, Cory Booker, New Jersey, Bernie Sanders, Vermont. All 6 of these Democrats joined every Republican except Lisa Murkowski and voted against this so-called bipartisan bill. Now, if I can research it, look up at the congressional record, how come the debate moderators can't? They keep lying about it. She's lied about it as recently as a few days ago. This was never a bipartisan bill to pass. It was a bipartisan bill that killed it. They killed it. So, again, hello, Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, Bob Menendez, Alex Padilla, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders joined all the Republicans but one to kill the bill. To kill the bill. So she's a liar, Kamala Harris. Her surrogates are liars, and the media are liars. But there's more than that. What was in this bill? I've talked about this before. In reality, it would codify into law the very Biden administration border migrant release policies that have been driving the migrant catastrophe on our borders. It would take the policies and make them law. The bill would facilitate the hiring of additional Border Patrol agents, but also, ready? Impose new training requirements on current agents, requiring them to receive relevant cultural, societal, racial, and religious training, including cross-cultural communications. In other words, it would take the border control and turn them into a woke enterprise. Has anybody told you that? I'm telling you that. The bill would make catch and release the law making stay in Mexico, which is what Donald Trump did and wants to do, an impossibility. The bill would require almost immediate work permits for illegal aliens, taking jobs from Americans. It would codify that. What else is in the bill? The bill would require the provision of your taxpayer money, taxpayer funds, to pay for lawyers to represent illegal aliens. Many of you can't even buy food and clothing. The bill would make legal up to 5,000 illegal aliens a day. That's at least 1.8 million a year, not including gotaways. And that provision is so riddled with loopholes and sunsets that it would dramatically increase the number of 5,000 to potentially 8,000 to 10,000. So it takes this massive number and it enshrines it in the law. So you folks need to understand that this is utterly and completely bogus. What else would the bill do? The bill would require the payment of billions of dollars to sanctuary cities and pro-illegal alien non-government organizations that are pushing and promoting illegal immigration. And so it would enshrine all these policies, add these new policies. It would make, as a matter of law, the southern border wide open, with even more illegal aliens coming across. Now, why isn't there a single reporter in America that has gone through this bill and told you what I just told you? Why isn't there a single reporter in America that has told you that these 6 Democrats voted to kill the bill? By the way, they didn't think it went far enough. And that Kamala Harris is a liar. Why didn't any of these so-called debate moderators prepare enough to question Kamala Harris about this bill? Because they wanted her to win. Now let's deal with abortion. First, let's deal with the 1973 decision, Roe v. Wade. I've written about it, I think, in my first book. Now, let's get to the basics. Roe v. Wade created the so-called trimester system. First 3 months, second 3 months, last 3 months. And what did it say? That you have an absolute right to an abortion in the first 3 months of pregnancy. Then it said in the second 3 months, you can have some government regulation, but that would be carefully reviewed by a court. Now, what about the third 3 months, the final trimester? They said states can restrict or even ban abortions. This is Roe v. Wade. In the last trimester, as the baby reaches the point where it can live outside the womb. That's what the decision says. That the third trimesters, the states can regulate abortions, and quite significantly. Roe v. Wade. Now, what is it that the Democrats want to do? Well, you know what they wanted to do. They had a bill come up in May 2022. 2022. And this is the bill that Kamala Harris said she would introduce and that we would pass. And this is why they're upsetting all these apparently suburban women. I see these liberals on these panels. I see the propagandists talk about, oh my goodness, abortion may be the #2 issue. And that's why Trump has this big divide that women don't want to support him. Well, what would the Democrats do? They would abolish all state regulations, every one of them. They would abolish any ban on partial birth abortion. That is, even if the baby's in the birth canal ready to be born, a state could not prohibit an abortion. That is really the killing of that baby. They would abolish virtually all safety regulations. They would abolish all parental notification requirements. So if you have a minor, they're pregnant, they want to have an abortion, moms and dads would not be told. They would abolish all conscience rights. Doctors, maybe it's a doctor who's Catholic and so forth, he says, I can't perform this. You would lose your license. They would abolish all carve-outs for faith-based hospitals. You know, you have hospitals that are run by nuns and that sort of thing. They would abolish it. And they would require you, the federal taxpayer, to pay for abortions. None of this is in Roe v. Wade. None of it. This is the most extreme proposed bill that the Democrats voted on, and 49 of them supported it. On the face of the earth. On the face of the earth. This is not codifying Roe v. Wade in any way. Now they lie about Trump. Trump opposes a federal ban on abortion. He has said it over and over and over again. Yet they lie, and they say if he becomes president, there's going to be a national ban on abortion. No, there's not. He favors exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother's health. By the way, many states do. He favors state decision-making. We're a diverse country. Everybody's not from San Francisco or New York City or LA. And so states can make these decisions, and states will make these decisions, basically the citizens of the states. He never even suggested government monitors that Kamala Harris keeps bringing up. So she's a liar. She's a liar on where the Democrats stand on abortion. She lies about what Roe v. Wade says. She lies about what Donald Trump says. And she lies about something else. This case in Georgia. Hospital that delayed emergency abortion bears blame for Georgia woman's death. Family's lawyers claim. Listen to this, please, because she's all over the country lying about this. The family of a Georgia woman who died after undergoing a medication abortion, the pill, was subsequently cited by Democrats as a tragic example of red states' restrictive abortion laws, is blaming the hospital for the woman's death and readying a lawsuit, according to their attorney. Amber Thurman, she died in 2022 after experiencing complications from taking abortion pills. She traveled to the Piedmont Henry Hospital in Stockbridge to receive a dilation and curettage procedure to remove the remaining tissue from the terminated pregnancy. But hospital staff allegedly waited about 20 hours performing the procedure. High-profile civil rights and personal injury attorney Ben Crump, you've seen this guy all over, is representing the family in their upcoming case against the hospital. Crump pinned blame for Thurman's death on the hospital, not Georgia's recent law that bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, Spectrum News reported. Quote, even under Georgia law, the doctors had a duty to act to save Amber, Crump said last week. She had taken the abortion pills. There were tissues left. There was no viable fetus or anything that would have prevented them from saving her life while she suffered. It had nothing at all to do with the Georgia abortion law. Thurman's death in August 2022 has since become the first known abortion death since the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs, with Democrats, including Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, citing her death as a result of restrictive Republican-backed abortion laws. Georgia's heartbeat law states that, quote, no abortion shall be performed if the unborn child has a detectable human heartbeat, except in the event of a medical emergency or medically futile pregnancy. And the law makes exceptions for abortions after the 6-week mark, including in the event of a medical emergency or medically futile pregnancy or a pregnancy through rape or incest, when the probable gestation age of the baby is less than 20 weeks. So they lie about Georgia, they lie about the abortion law, and they keep using it because they know the media is either too stupid or too partisan to look. But unfortunately, so are Republicans, and so are hosts and commentators on panels. One other thing, Tim Walz, to show you how extreme these people are. Tim Walz repealed the Born Alive Infants Act in 2023, along with other state restrictions on abortions in Minnesota. The law stated that a born-alive infant as a result of an abortion shall be fully recognized as a human person and accorded immediate protection under the law. All reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to preserve the life and health of the born-alive infant. That was the law in Minnesota until Tim Walz signed a law specifically repealing the Born Alive Infants Protection language. In fact, 5 babies died after they were born alive due to a failed induced abortion in 2021, according to an annual report from the Minnesota Department of Health. That annual report is no longer released because Walz ordered them not released. What do you think about that? I remember one of these so-called debate moderators said, when Donald Trump said, yes, they leave babies on the table to die, she said, and for the record, that's never happened. Liar, liar, liar. What else would he do? Eliminated waiting periods, eliminated parental notification. So Walz and Harris are extremists. Nowhere on the face of the earth with the kind of abortion practices that they're pushing or Schumer, the Democrat Party's pushing, nowhere on the face of the earth that they exist. They never existed in the United States of America, and they take Roe v. Wade because they figure people are not going to read the decision, and they say, no, we just want to put Roe v. Wade in place. No, they don't. Their proposed bill has nothing to do with Roe v. Wade. It is an extremist radical bill. They lie about immigration. They lie about abortion because Kamala Harris is a horrendous candidate, because Kamala Harris is an empty pantsuit, and because they have $1 billion to throw around, and they have an in-kind contribution of billions from a Pravda-type media to push their agenda. So maybe the reason abortion is the number 3 or number 2 issue is because they keep lying about it and scaring women. And so you women in the suburbs that the pollsters say are really leaning heavily towards Kamala Harris, do you like being lied to? Do you? Because she's a fraud and a phony.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.